All right, everybody, we are live. Welcome to Wild Remedies Live. This is a dandelion maple syrup cake, and I'm John Gallagher from LearningHerbs. And with me today are the authors of the amazing new book, Wild Remedies, and they are Rosalee de la Forêt and Emily Han. They're with me. Hey, how are you?
Hi.
Hello, hi everyone.
What did you think of my surprise?
John just showed us that. I was totally
It was a
totally
surprise.
surprised. Yeah.
It's a totally surprise. It's a virtual cake. I want to tell you the story. No, for me, it's a real cake. For everybody watching it, it's a virtual cake. But you can actually make the cake because this cake is a recipe from Wild Remedies. This is Wild Remedies Live, and I am live with the authors today, Emily Han and Rosalee de la Forêt. You know them also as authors of Rosalee's author of Alchemy of Verbs, Transform all kinds of fun stuff into herbal remedies that heal, and Emily Han, Wild Drinks and Cocktails. What's the subtitle?
I don't even remember the subtitle. It's so extensive.
It's so awesome. You can make all kinds of drinks. So there's a story behind this cake, and I want to show you a few pictures while everyone's thinking of their questions and getting them in, because I thought this would be a fun place to start, because this cake was actually a surprise. I thought it was a surprise for me when I saw it, but no. I'm going to tell you, it's actually a surprise for Emily and Rosalee from one of their biggest fans here. And let's see, I'm going to try to go to this screen share thing, and I'll tell you, let's see, screen share. And then I got to go to here, and then I'm going to here. I'm going to share my screen right here. So here's here's herb fairies, right? You don't know about the herb fairy. A lot of people may not know this. We have this book called Herb Fairies, books, and it's a children's program for kids. And in Herb Fairies, Kimberly and mine's daughter, Haley, she's all the way on your left there. She's depicted there, and she's around 5 years old or so. And we made them characters because our kids grew up making remedies. And this is Haley, my daughter, and she's a little baby. And this may be the age where Rosalee first met her. Do you think?
Yeah, no, that's about it, I think.
In the backyard, and there she is. There she is amongst the dandelions, and she's getting a little older amongst the dandelion. That's like I think probably a little later because there's dandelion seeds. And then, she liked to emulate her dad. I'd be taking pictures of herbal remedies in the kitchen, and she'd get her little camera, and she'd take her picture, and I take my picture. And so, there's Haley, and she's getting a little, oh, there she is making the remedy of probably on one of the LearningHerbs lessons years ago. And see that little toy, and this really interesting, the little toy in the background there to the right of her. I actually used to play with that when I was a kid. That's my Fisher Price castle. She's growing up, still loves dandelions, and here she loves violets. And a lot of you probably remember her around this age, because that's about when Herb Fairies came out, because this is one of the lessons where she's making candy violet flowers. And then this is, maybe she's 12 here or so. But then yesterday, I caught her in the act. Of coming in, picking dandelions and bringing them inside. And I was like, what are you up to, young lady? And then I came home last night, and boom, she made this cake. So there's Haley now. Yesterday, so here's the cake, and I had to take the flowers around the edge off because they all got closed up and stuff and didn't look quite as pretty. And she made this for both of you because she was really excited that we were doing this today. And she made this for Emily and Rosalee. And then the next thing she said after that very beautiful, heartfelt sharing was, and make sure you bring it home so I can eat it tomorrow night.
All right.
She's very, efficient that way.
Well, please thank her for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, she looks so much more than the last time I saw her, and so much like Kimberly. It's like she looks more and more like Kimberly.
I know. It is amazing. It's true. Sometimes I confuse, like I see them like in the distance, and I'm like, wait, is that? Oh no. So anyway, everyone, welcome to it's Saturday morning in some places, and it's Saturday afternoon in some others. And what we're going to do today is simply ask questions. We've been sharing wild remedies with you all week. Many of you purchased it a while ago and received your copies in the mail. A lot of you were on the webinar, the Weeds to Wellness webinar, and we said, hey, collect your questions. And some of your Herb Mentor members who are here, and you have questions. So we're here for everybody. And this is really just about Q&A. I'm going to be in the background here clicking on stuff while Rosalee and Emily take a lot of the questions. So maybe I'll pop in every once in a while. But if you're wondering about Wild Remedies before we get started here, the wildremediesbook.com is where you can go pick up a copy on another. You can open another window while you're watching us, and that's what we're talking about today. And I have a couple of housekeeping things too, everybody. And one is, the main one is for chatting. If you're on Facebook, use the chat thread under the video where you're watching. Do not use Facebook Messenger or any other messaging things to ask questions, because our wonderful customer experience team, they're here, and we have Karen and Leon, and they're helping behind the scenes as well. So you can help them out by just asking your questions in that thread and not doing that. That would be awesome. And I don't remember what else there was, but maybe I'll remember. If you having a little trouble, if you're watching on Wild Remedies or Alchemy groups, you can and you want like your question to show you have to click something to get permissions. If you haven't done that or don't want to do that, you just go to the learningherbs.com Facebook page, and it's playing there too. And you can just a little easier access there. So folks are watching on YouTube, they're watching on Facebook. Let's get going. Maybe Rosalee disappeared, but I'm sure she'll be back. I don't know what happened to Rosalee. Rosalee, come back.
You went to eat the cake, I think.
You went to eat the cake. Well, all right. So she'll probably be back in a second, and we're going to look at some questions here. Let's see. So Emily, we have a question from BJ. I'm wondering if violas are the same as violets. I have what's called Johnny Jumps Up in my yard, and I got from a garden center, and want to know if you can use them like violets. She's in north central Idaho.
Yeah, some of them, there are many different species, and so they may not have all of the same medicinal properties. I find sometimes they're a little less demulcent than the violets, but they're edible and beautiful, and I use them a lot. So yeah, you can definitely use those Johnny Jump Up violas too. Cool.
Where did Rosalee go? Sorry, everyone. All right, so I'm going to go to the questions here too. And so you garden, Emily. How do you keep, well, as V Bitar says here, how do you keep bugs off your medicinal garden?
Well, I'm probably not the world's best gardener, because I love having the bugs there, and people tease me because I get really excited when there's slugs in the garden, and I know most gardeners don't quite feel the same way. But for me, I'm growing the herbs and other plants for both of us, so it's for the insects and for me in my community. There are like some, sometimes if they're large enough to pick off and move, I might move them to a different part of the garden or different plants that aren't, the ones that I want them on. There are natural sprays that you can make to deter bugs and things like that. But yeah, for me, it's I'm growing the plants for both of us, so it's okay if there's some bugs there. All right. Well, I don't know if Rosalee or John are here anymore, so I'm going to scroll through some questions and see. Using elderberry for maintenance, do you still recommend upping the dosage of elderberry upon onset of a cold bug during this uncertain time? So for me, I use it up until I'm getting sick, and then if I do get sick, then we'll usually switch to other herbs that might address more of the symptoms if it's a cough or a fever or things like that. So I tend to use it more as a preventive before actually getting ill.
So back on there. And so I'm on the phone with Rosalee here. Let's see what she has to say. This is live television, everybody. All right, so I'm actually on live and I'm talking to you and everyone can hear me. Rosalee says there are high winds where she's at and her internet went out. Right at 11. We saw her at the introduction. Emily's like, oh boy. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll take you got the link that's on the thing there, and then you could just use that and join right in on your phone. Yeah, get to where you can. Okay, we'll keep everything going. Meanwhile, Emily and I got it. All right. Okay. Bye. Okay, so you heard that, everybody. Rosalee literally at 11, winds kick up and knock her in her house.
Oh, no.
So, Emily, I'm going to help you out here. This is Emily and myself here. This is Emily and John live on Wild Remedies Live. And this is going to be fun. So, all right. So our questions might be, I was going to be more organized and go, through the questions or anything. We're just going to randomly pick stuff. Does the book include a lot of wild herbs that are available in Northeast Canada?
I'm actually not familiar, with exactly with the plants in Northeast Canada, but we did pick the plants that would be really widespread throughout the world and in temperate regions. So yeah, a lot of the plants are very common weeds, and we really wanted to make sure that they would be relevant to a lot of people all over the world. And even if some of the plants might not be growing wild, there are also a lot of things that can grow in a garden or even in the grocery store, things like mint and citrus and blackberries, things like that. So it would be very accessible to people. And the book is really about getting to know where you live and the plants where you live and the rhythm of the seasons wherever you are. Because as you may know, like Rosalee lives in rural Washington State and I live in Los Angeles. And so we live in very different regions. And so it was one of the big goals of our book was to make sure that this book would be accessible to many different people.
Well, I mean, I'm from the East Coast. I'm and I think the plants are probably very similar, if not the same plants growing in Northeast Canada. And for the most part, yeah, they're except for like cactus, except for the prickly pear and maybe a couple of others. But absolutely, most of these are at least they can grow in your gardens. Cool. Let's see here. What's the best way to preserve wild crafted herbs, Jill?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to preserve them, and it kind of depends on how you might want to use them. Drying is definitely a great way to preserve them if you want to use them in teas, or you later make things like tinctures and salves. And depending on kind of your setup at home and the humidity of where you live, there's lots of different ways to dry the herbs. Easiest is often just to bundle them up and hang them up until they dry. But you could also, if you live in a really humid area, then something like a dehydrator or your oven on a low setting might be the best way to dry them. Also, things like you can make foods as well as preparations of herbs and freeze them, and making things like tinctures or honeys with herbs. Those are also ways to preserve them. So throughout the book we also really wanted to show a range of different recipes so that you're using things like drying or making vinegars or making foods that like pestos and things like that you could freeze. And so there's all different ways that you can preserve them and then enjoy them throughout the year.
Great. Karen wants to know if nasturtium flowers are edible. Are the leaves? I know that they're edible. Are the leaves edible too?
Yes, they are both edible. In fact, I've been eating a lot lately because there's a large sections of my garden that are just overrun with feral nasturtium plants. And so, yeah, the leaves are definitely edible. And depending on the plant and how old it is, they may be more or less peppery. So you can give it a nibble and see if you like it.
You know, one of my favorite things to do with the flowers is I'll put them in vinegar,
Oh yeah, it makes a beautiful vinegar.
and it makes this amazing color, and just in itself, and it is that peppery taste. And put that with a little olive oil, and
Mhm.
you have a nice salad dressing.
Yeah, it's delicious. And the leaves can be a little intense sometimes. You might not want to eat an entire salad of nasturtium
Mm,
leaves, but
right.
adding, a few of them to a salad definitely kind of perks things up. And I use them, the leaves are large enough. I use them like as like lettuce wraps kind of a lot of times too.
Oh, great idea. All
Mhm.
right. And do you know if the are dogwood flowers and blueberries edible?
Blueberries.
So
Mm.
blueberry flowers she's probably talking about.
Oh,
If
good
you know
question. I
blueberries.
am not familiar with
Mm.
either of them. So
I don't know about dogwood. I mean, I imagine the blueberry flowers you could eat them. I don't know what they'll
yeah.
be. They'll probably be a little stringent.
Mhm.
They might have a little flavor to them, but I would just let them turn into blueberries.
Yeah.
um, Roles or tips on creating your own tinctures
Yeah, let's
from
see where to
Tawana.
start. Um, Well, a couple different ways to make tinctures, and one would be a simpler method where you're pretty much just putting the herbs in a jar and covering them with alcohol. And then there's other ways to really kind of
Mhm.
extract the maximum constituents and medicinal properties from the herbs, where you'd be using very specific ratios of the herb to the alcohol. So we included kind of two different ways in the book too, so that you could have experience with both of those different ways. But as far as like, a lot of times people ask about like what kind of alcohol to use. And oftentimes a really high proof alcohol, like an Everclear or something like that, is great because it's stronger. It's going to preserve better, pull out more constituents, especially if you have like fresh or juicy herbs as opposed to dry ones. It's often good to
Mhm.
have a really high proof. But if you don't have access to that, just of regular um, 80% vodka is often will work just fine.
Hmm. Okay. So I have this question here, and I'm putting it on here just because it was mentioned in the webinar the other day. And so Doug, you read about elderberry shouldn't be used for COVID-19. Now, I left because I figured this question might come up. I left, and let me put the I put it here somewhere. Did I make it? I thought I made a little banner here to put up anyway. Here we go. So the Weeds for Wellness webinar, you can watch it. I left it up. You can when you're finished here, you can just go over and it'll start within like I think it's playing every 15 minutes or so. And Rosalee has a wonderful take on that in this webinar, and you can watch it all weekend. And I highly suggest you do that because it's a lot to it. And I just thought, with all the questions that we're getting, if this came up, that I would just refer you to there. Now, if Rosalee, if you can remember this, and Rosalee is back on later, we can ask her too then. But I think that's what probably Emily would probably say at this point about that, right?
Yeah, I think her discussion of that in the webinar is really good. So I would
Mm.
recommend checking that out because I had questions about that myself and learned a lot from what Rosalie had to tell us.
Christy said, "You got this."
Thanks, Christy.
Tatumar, hello from EU and Bulgaria. Hello. Good
Hello.
evening.
Wow.
Good evening. It's late there now. So hi, thanks for the class. Is mallow and marshmallow the same thing?
Mallow and marshmallow are related. They're in the same family, but mallow is a malva species, so it's not exactly the same plant, but they can be used in very much the same way. It has that demulcent, like moistening kind of gooey quality to it.
Mhm.
So I use mallow leaves, flowers, and roots pretty much the same way as you could use in marshmallow.
Great. Amy, tell me about dandelions. Do you eat the whole flower? Are they bitter or just for decorating? Well, I'm just
Wow.
going to make everyone salivate over this while you answer it. No, go ahead.
Yeah, you can eat the whole flower. The little like green sepals at the bottom of the flower, those can often be more bitter. So you kind of like pick those off before you, or you can taste them and see what you think. But before you're popping the whole flower in your mouth, might want to remove that part. But yeah, they're not only do they just make things look sunny and joyful, but they can be the whole thing can be eaten as well. It's not just
Yeah. So Haley was there picking the petals. Well, actually, they're not petals, but each of these little things are actually whole flowers. There are many, many thousand or whatever flowers on a whole bud, and then because that's a bitter part. But I believe on Learning Herbs, if you go to the blog and search, there's lots of some dandelion flower recipe. There's like dandelion flower cookies somewhere. I know that's definitely in Herb Fairies. It's probably in there somewhere. But yeah, there's lots. Soda, Kimberly makes soda with the flowers. It's really excellent. So lots you can do. So there are many books written on dandelion. So yeah, and I don't think it's in this cake, right? Is it in the cake? The recipe?
Yes, there
Oh, it
actually
is in
are
the
flowers in
okay.
the cake.
Yeah, in the dandelion section. And where's the dandelion in the section towards there? Here it is. So let me give you a tour of like, so there's dandelion roots right there. Oh, that's the dandelion root part. The dandelion flower further up. Yeah. Oh, here it is. Aha. So there's a whole section on dandelion leaf and flower, and that maple cake is in there. And what I really love about the book too is like for identification, it's got this really great guide and cautions and all kinds of information there because you want to make sure that you're gathering dandelion flowers and not like cat's ear, hawkweed, and which usually are flowering later in the summer, depending on where you live, of course. But where I live, that'll come up later. So people often think the dandelions, right, are flowering all summer, but that's not the case. It's different plants that are coming up. So do you know, Emily, about anything about transplanting wild violets to be raised in her garden bed?
I've never actually done it, so I can't speak from personal experience, but I have transplanted the plants, around before, and they tended to transplant really well. So I would want to make sure that the wild violets that you're planting or wanting to transplant are something that's very abundant in your area. In a lot of places there are native violets, species of violets that might not be in very much abundance, or that you don't really want to disturb from their native habitat. So just research the species that you have before doing that. But if it's one of those really common ones, then you might be able to transplant that to your garden.
Can blackberry leaf be used for tea?
Yes.
Or medicinal use?
Sometimes it's hard to remember what's in the book, but I'm thinking we do have a recipe in the book. But yes, it can be used in teas. It's I often actually use them. Not only do they have medicinal uses and being astringent and such, but often just use them kind of as a substitute for black tea leaves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's very astringent, the leaf, as well as the root, and there's a lot of medicinal uses for that as well. Let's see here. Oh, Brittany asks about what she can use. She has yarrow flowering. Would this be a good time to harvest if it's flowering?
Yeah, I often try to harvest some leaves like kind of just as the plant is flowering. So if it's really far along, then it's not always it's not going to be quite as potent. But if it has just started flowering, then I would probably harvest both leaves and flowers and use them together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as far as using them to like make salves and teas and poultices, things like that.
With yarrow, do you ever like in where I used to live, well, not too far from where I live now, in Western Washington, I would have it growing in the garden because I'd want it handy, But then I would compare though that where it's growing in a wetter area and taste that compared to the yarrow that was like growing in the wild when I would go to harvest plants in Eastern Washington, where it's more desert like, and I would taste a little bit of that. I'm like, whoa. And so I'm feeling like, do you find that sometimes yarrow gathered, wildcrafted for your own personal use would be maybe a little better for than garden yarrow?
Yeah, it can be, if it's really kind of like coddled and wet, and then it tends to, like you're saying, it's not as aromatic, not as potent. And I do grow a lot of yarrow in my garden that I use medicinally, but I'll tend to it's kind of in different patches of the garden, and I will gather the ones that are in like kind of less cultivated areas that are more dry, because I think the yarrow just kind of prefers, or become stronger medicinally in that type of
Yeah.
environment. So the plants that are kind of, more with like the garden flowers and that have ended up over there are, again, they're not as strong. So,
Yeah, just
so
something to point out.
yeah.
Speaking of yarrow, Jan's daughter and I were wondering if they could use dried yarrow to make tincture, or are the substances we want deteriorated? So
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you can definitely make a tincture with dried yarrow. With any dried herbs, people often ask like how long are they good for? And there's not really, a hard and fast rule, after 1 year, throw it out or something. Is you really want to just smell it and taste it. And if it still seems really potent, then you can definitely still use that to make tinctures.
great. Um, so Nancy, is it okay to use chickweed, dry chickweed for an herbal oil? So let's talk about how you might make chickweed oil.
Yeah, chickweed, it loses a lot of its potency once it's dried. So it's one of those herbs that's really best used fresh, or frozen sometimes. But dried chickweed, it tends to not be so strong. So to do an herbal oil with chickweed, and we have a whole recipe in the book to make a salve with that.
Okay.
I harvest the chickweed and kind of let it wilt for a while, kind of give up some of that moisture until it's like kind of limp, and then you start infusing that in the oil, the chickweed in the oil, heat that up, then turn it off for a few hours and heat it up and turn it off, and you can do that for like a day or two, and you're just kind of like gently heating that fresh wilted chickweed in the oil, and then that creates a really nice strong oil that you can use by itself or that you could make a salve with.
Like a deep green. I just found it in the
Oh
book
yeah,
right
there it
there.
is.
Um,
And that's my favorite. Like I use that all summer long for like, to soothe like bug bites and tiny, small scratches and things like that. So that's really one of my go-to.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Emily, because a lot of times you might see, like, say, for example, at Learning Herbs, we have the herbal remedy kit, and we'll have like comfrey and calendula and different herbs in it.
Mhm.
And if you go to in the store, you often that's that mixture that you often see. But I find it personally more like, if you want to learn about herbs, make something with one herb, like
Mhm.
that chickweed salve, and then learn how that works. And you might find that that's enough. Like for me personally, I have a lot of cottonwood in my area, and we gather buds, and I like making a salve out of that. And you have that in your book too.
Mhm.
Um, and like I'll use just that one plant salve or that one
Mhm.
plant oil for all kinds of things. And you and I might use this like different plants, right, for the same things, like our
Right.
salves for the same things. But it's
Mhm.
often like, what do you have growing around you, right? Or what do you yeah, you speak to that a little, just as far as like sometimes people think you have to go and buy these exotic herbs or herbs from, that chipped in
Mhm.
from someplace or whatever, and do all these crazy creations when sometimes the
Right.
answers are just growing outside in your dooryard, right?
Mhm. Yeah, we always hear all these things about, superfoods and the newest miracle ingredient from here or there. And,
Mm,
um, some of those things are wonderful and, we do use them, but often some of that really strong medicine is just right outside your door and you might not have known, or you might know the plant, but just think, it's common. It's, they can't be very powerful, but it often is really all we need. So, using those plants, gathering the ones that are just around you, and
mm,
not only is it great medicine, but you learn so much in the process of observing those plants, getting to know that world just outside your door, harvesting them yourself. I feel like that whole process is kind of part of the medicine as well. Um, and like you were
mm.
saying, a lot of those herbs, we can also get overwhelmed, thinking that we have to kind of throw the kitchen sink at something and combine, 10 herbs into something like that. And then you have to find them all and buy them all. And really just learning those plants one by one and finding out, learning that specific plant, how it likes to grow, making a medicine, remedy with it, and how it reacts with your body and everything. You can just learn so much from using those simple but powerful single herbs.
Kimberly said, was asking the other day, it was like, Shizer, right now it's hard to order some herbs. Should we order in some of our favorites to
Mhm.
make something, or what should we do, work on? And I said, we could, she also was worrying about growing, like, what should we grow something like, that there's things that we might use more of. And, and so, and I was like, well, actually, if we need something in an emergency as far as our immune system or first aid, there's stuff growing, at least where I live, like all the time outside. I could just,
Mhm.
there's anytime there's Oregon grape right outside the door. There's in the kitchen garden there's oregano and thyme and
Mhm.
rosemary and sage. And if you know where your plants are in your garden, you can get the roots even in the winter. So
Mhm.
even if it's like I don't have anything prepared or whatever, there's always, you know, all kinds of things growing outside. And
Yeah.
that's a great place to get to. And that's what I love about Wild Remedies, your book, is because you may start out just like, all right, I'm going to there's some dandelion flowers and make this cake. But in time, your own passion is going to be driven, and you're going to suddenly be able to walk outside, and not just what's growing in your yard or the field or the local farm, but what's in the wild, the meadows, the woods. It's going to all be your medicine cabinet, accessible to you anytime, even in an emergency, right?
Yeah, it so changes the way you see the world around you, like you said, you start noticing it here and there and everywhere you go. It's like you have these plant friends and medicine and
Hmm.
yeah, it's really empowering to feel like know the plants around you.
Well, I just noticed that Rosalee is there.
Oh, yeah.
She looks like she's in her car. She's got her sunglasses on. I'm gonna add it. I'm gonna add you. There she is. All
Hi,
right.
everyone.
That's dedication.
Yeah, I can't leave my car because it's so windy
Oh my
that I
goodness.
think it would just be really annoying to hear the wind in the mic all the time. You can see
I
me and hear. Let me see if I can. It's not too bright out. I can take off my glasses.
we're gonna just have to ask Rosalie questions, right? Because let's see.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky to go back and forth.
I gotta tell you that Emily's been just handling all the questions like a pro
Yeah,
here.
no
No
doubt. I'm not surprised.
problem.
It was funny because right before we went live, Emily and I were joking about her doing it by herself. So Emily, this is like, be careful what you joke about. But it's all been going well, I assume. So
Yeah, it's amazing questions. I'm gonna give one to you, Rosalie, here. And
all right, I'll jump right in.
okay, so Deborah asking your recommended amounts for tinctures. Can you explain what ratios mean? Example 1 to 5, 1 to 2. Is this 1 part, 5 parts? And the book is fantastic.
Yay. Yeah, so there's different ways of making tinctures. One way is what we call the folk method, and that's basically where you just kind of eyeball it and you put as much plant material in the jar, especially if it's fresh, as you can, and then use alcohol with that. So with that, it's called the folk method because there's not really a lot of structured measurement going on, and that's always that's one way you could make tinctures. For the recommended amounts in the books, we're using the ratio method to give an idea of exactly the strength that we're talking about, because the folk method, what's great about the folk method is it's easy, right? There's not a lot of complicated measurements going on, but the problem with it is that you don't always know the end strength of your tincture. So when you use the ratio method, it's letting you know exactly, what part to what part. So when you see 1 to 5 parts, that means generally that you're using a dried herb. And when you use 1 to 2 parts, then you're using a fresh herb. And that's just in general. That's how those measurements go. And I'm like the worst with math and figuring out tincture ratios. So whenever I always use the ratio method, but I have to admit that my husband helps me when we figure those out. And so it is a weighing thing. So basically you weigh your herb and then use the amount of alcohol to that. So like in a 1 to 2 ratio, if I weigh my herbs at, I'm just going to make up numbers here. Like if I have 100 grams of herb, then I'm going to use, it's going to be hard for me to say that. Emily, do you have a better math sense for that?
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading questions. So
Yeah.
Yes.
We're talking about the ratio method, and I'm just being honest that Xavier, my husband, always helps me when I make them. So I always use the ratio method, but I just he's there with me figuring it out because I just don't really have a head for that. So so I know we weigh everything out, and if it's like a 1 to 2 tincture, then if I weigh out 100 grams of herb, then and it's a fresh herb, then I'll use I can't remember what the
100 milliliters. Yeah, I do like grams to milliliters. So I'll weigh it by
grams to milliliters.
and that's your first number. So like your 1, and then the second one, if it's like 5 or 2, whatever, that would be, multiplying that and then using the milliliters of your alcohol.
Right. It's very simple. It's just my head doesn't work like that. But I actually, one day I had Xavier sit down and like explain it to me super clearly. And I got it down myself and I made a video of it. And we have that video, like a step-by-step video on how to make a ratio tincture in Herb Mentor. And I like it. Every year I watch that because I have to remind myself how to do it. Yeah, my brain just somehow doesn't work like that. But it is very simple because you're using grams and milliliters, and it's like the math isn't hard. You just like gotta think. But thanks for throwing me the hardball first thing, John.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you disappeared on this question. I'm just going to read it to you. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience. I'm wondering if you use Echinacea purpurea dried root. I was taught that it doesn't hold its medicinal quality. It's dried. And I was, so I always make my preparations with fresh root and flower, but angustifolia is fine to use dried according to my work with Susan Weed. I'm wondering if this still holds true with your experience. So she's asking about purpurea.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me when I was going to like survival skill school. I remember one day the teacher asked, he's like, what's the best knife to have on you in a survival situation? We're all like, what knife? Like we're all like ready to write down what knife we're going to get. And he's like, the one you have on you. And I've always remembered that. Like there's something to be said for like just being practical. So there are so many different ways to make echinacea tincture. And I definitely I have my favorites over the years, but like my favorites aren't necessarily everyone else's favorites. So there's definitely something to be said for experimenting and figuring out what you like best. What's cool about echinacea is the taste of it can be very illuminating into its strength. So if you've never tasted echinacea before, then you know that it has this, or you don't know, but it has this zing to it that's like, we call it a sialagogue, which means it increases salivation. And it has this kind of like almost numbing but tingling effect, and it definitely does increase salivation. And so when you get used to what that tastes like in different echinaceas, then you can begin to test it to see for yourself how strong something is. So if I test an echinacea tincture, then, just by that, I mean, like I take 2 drops on my tongue and it doesn't have any kind of zing or that that very distinct sensation to it, then I know that's probably not the best preparation. And so rather than say like, oh, you can only do it this way or that way, I would say test the tincture you have and see how it is, and see what the strength is, and let that be your guide. I will tell you my personal preferences, which is to tincture all of Echinacea purpurea when it's in flower, and that's the roots, the leaves, and the flowers, and do that all fresh. That's my preference, and I have Echinacea purpurea growing fresh in my garden, so it's easy for me to do that. I really love Echinacea angustifolia, and in that case, I'll do the roots only, and typically I use that dried because Echinacea angustifolia is a bit tricky to grow. I've grown it several times, but just never stays, so I haven't had as much success growing that one. So I'll get it from a cultivated source when it's dried, and I'll make a tincture with that. And that's probably my most favorite. But again, if I'm going to use Echinacea purpurea, I prefer it fresh, and I prefer using the whole plant at the same time.
And sometimes sometimes it's what you get too. Like it was one time we worked on this organic farm. We were when Rowan was little, and they sold all the cut flowers with their arrangements, so we couldn't use those. I wasn't allowed to dig up the roots because they weren't my plants. So they were like, but when the seed heads would come out, like in the fall, they were like, sure, you can take those. So I would just tincture seeds, and just the seeds themselves.
The seeds are quite strong.
Tincture. Yeah. So use what I got.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Emily, are wild dandelions in LA safe to eat? Do they have a high metal content?
It could depend on where they're growing. So you would want to know the actual soil. If it's growing along a roadside or something, then I would not forage for those ones. If they're in your yard and you know that your yard isn't sprayed with pesticides and herbicides and doesn't have a history of there being like heavy metal deposits there, then they could be safe. So it really kind of depends on your location. In my part of LA, we actually don't really have wild dandelions growing, so I grow them in my raised bed. So yeah, depends on where you are. I was seeing another question that someone asked about having your soil tested, which is kind of related. If you live in the US, each state has a cooperative extension service that's through a local a university in your state, and they offer soil testing services. So that's a great place to check with a cooperative extension service for your state.
That's this question about the book from Anne from YouTube, from Somerset, UK. Does your book include research references? Thank you.
Yes, it does.
It does.
I'll let Rosalee go for that one.
I haven't counted how many are in this one. I remember one time I counted for alchemy, and there was over 250 references in alchemy. For wild remedies, there's going to be a bit less just because there's not as much research done on, say, dandelion as there is like turmeric, which was more the focus of alchemy. So there's a little bit less, but there's definitely a lot. And we chose those studies very critically. Like we don't use, we never cite animal studies, both for ethical reasons, and it's very difficult to even extrapolate that information and into humans. And if we did use in vitro studies, which means that those are outside of the body and generally done like in the lab in a petri dish. If we use those, then we're very clear that we use those. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine when there's things that happen in the petri dish and then people say like, oh, like just because it does something in a petri dish doesn't mean it's going to do it in our own body. So most of the studies we cite are clinical trials, randomized, placebo-controlled. We're always looking for high-quality trials. So there's lots of them in the book, and they're all referenced too.
Let's see here. Rosalee touched on echinacea and how it should be not used to boost the generally low immunity, how it should not be used to boost general low immunity. She mentioned tonic herbs, astragalus, and medicinal mushrooms. Could you possibly expand on that?
Sure. So when we have lots of herbs that affect the immune system, and as we get to know more and more about these herbs, I think it's becoming more and more clear that they act along the scale of efficacy, and they also act differently in individual people. And so there's no firm lines. There are some herbs that are known to be more stimulating to the immune system, and those ones are taken more often for acute short-term situations. So for example, if you feel like you're getting sick, you can take an immune stimulant to really, boost your immune system and kind of just really help fortify your defense system and hopefully prevent or either prevent or shorten the duration of a cold or flu. There's also a lot of herbs, like tonic herbs, like this person mentioned, astragalus, and also mushrooms, which we herbalists often call herbs, that are used as what we call tonic or building herbs. These herbs are taken over time to help nourish and build the immune system. So if somebody is getting sick frequently, like they're coming down with a cold or flu often, then it's not really the best idea to use short-term stimulants because we already know that their immune system is low. Kind of an example of this would be like if somebody was just really tired all the time and they weren't getting sleep and they were just go, and then they rely on coffee to keep them going. Sometimes that's necessary, honestly. But if that's done long-term, coffee is used instead of sleep for energy purposes, then that's going to have repercussions. So it's kind of similar with these stimulant herbs. If somebody has a low immune system, the goal isn't to stimulate their kind of low operating immune system. What we want to do is nourish and build from the ground up, so to speak, so that their immune system can just be operating at a higher level all the time. And but again, there's no firm lines. There's definitely some information out there showing that echinacea does have immunomodulating or immune balancing qualities to it. But in general, the way it's used is that echinacea is used for short-term acute situations when you just want a little kind of zip to the immune system, whereas these tonic building herbs are taken long-term over time to really build up the immune system.
Zan, just she had asked a question about ratios before, and she said this about she doesn't, she's new to medicinal herbs and doesn't quite get it. I just want to say, Zan, that I don't know if you got a chance to watch the Wild Remedies docuseries. If you did, and it comes as a bonus when you register Wild Remedies. It comes just if you get Wild Remedies, go to wildremediesbook.com, get the book, preferably before Monday. And in there, you're going to get to watch it. And there's this herbalist, one of Rosalee's friends, colleagues, Christophe Bernard. And he says in there that, it's like, I'm not going to attempt his accent, but he's just talking about, there's this ratio thing. And you know what? I'm just telling people to do, just cut up the herb, use the folk method, put it in a jar. And so Emily, perhaps, can you explain, like, is that how you make tinctures mostly? And you do worry about the ratio method in real life?
I do use the ratio method because I'm really nerdy.
I want to say
stuff like that, but when I started out, I didn't. So, what were you going to say, Rosalee?
Well, I was just going to say Zan is confused because I did not explain it very well, so that's fair. But like I said on Herb Mentor, I do have that step-by-step thing, and if people are interested in the Wild Remedies face group, we could explain it step-by-step and very clearly. In the book, actually, there's a recipe for Echinacea glycerite, and in there I measured out, that's a ratio method recipe in there, so that's measured out, and if you make it according to that recipe, then you're going to make it. All of them practically are too, so I kind of did all the measuring for you in that recipe, but we can expand more on that. But yeah, if you're confused, that's because I did not explain it very well, because again, my brain just doesn't really work like that, so I have to be like very focused and thinking about that in a particular way.
And I'll say me personally, and in our house, I have never used the ratio method, like, ever. And I've been making tinctures for like 20 years. So I just go out and if it's a fresh herb, I just chop it all up real good. I put it in the jar. I fill it with if it's vodka, whatever, alcohol or whatever you're using. And I shake it and I leave it for 6 weeks and I strain it. Honestly, I've always kept it simple and just do that. And that's a great thing to do. And then you can play chemist if you want to, like, as you're going along, but don't let that stop you from starting.
Yeah, definitely.
I think whichever way makes you more excited to do it. Like for me, it's like, I like doing all the math and everything. So for me, that's, part of what I enjoy. But if that is daunting, then go with the folk method for sure.
Yeah. Exactly. So this is probably going to fill up the screen, but Trip, I know he comes on to a lot of our lives.
Hi, Trip.
And then another category not mentioned in your comments are native plants. Noxious weeds are considered invasive, introduced from areas outside the initial habitat, which spread readily and display native species or wanted plants, such as in your garden, invasive. Pretty similar. Can you read this? And again, there are categories. Oh, that's a long question. And there are categories as to how invasive and noxious and particular weed species may be. Naturalized plants are plants not considered native, but which have established themselves since European contact. So I'm talking about that. Emily, do you have anything to share?
It wasn't clear if there was a specific question about it. But yeah, definitely the plants in the book, a lot of them are, if you live in the US, a lot of them will be those so-called invasive species, and some of them noxious weeds. And some of them, will be native, or some species will be native to where you live. There might be a combination. There might be, for example, violets, some that are native to your area and some that are introduced. So, there are like kind of all these different names or categories that we give to these plants. A lot of times if you're harvesting those ones that are invasive and crowding out, those native species, you can actually be doing your ecosystem a favor. You're allowing those native plants to flourish as you're, removing some of the other ones. At the same time, I think both Rosalee and I say that, all plants deserve our respect. And so, even if you're harvesting something that's very common, if it's a dandelion that's not native to where you live or something, that it's still a living plant and deserves our respect at the same time. And these things can be so complex. I think where I live, there's a lot of invasive mustard. And so, ideally like to pull that out and plant natives in their place. But at the same time, in some areas that have been really disturbed by, human activity, and there's really not much plant life there, those mustard flowers, do offer nectar and pollen to insects that wouldn't have anything otherwise. So there's so many different in our world, just complexities to how these plants have how we've moved them around. But it definitely getting to know where you live and being aware of kind of the role that these different plants play is an important part of this.
I just got a little note from Karen, who asked me that if you're asking questions again, please don't use the Facebook Messenger or your Messenger thing. Just use the chat thing or whatever is like right under or part of the video feed here, and because we can't see the Messenger ones, and it confuses we're not going to get them. So, there's a couple of questions, quick ones you can do here, because a few people asked. Linda asked how you can make a tincture without alcohol, and you had just mentioned glycerite, so I thought maybe we'd make that connection if maybe people not know what that is.
Yeah, so you can't make tinctures without alcohol is the short answer. That is the definition of a tincture, is an alcohol extract, but you can make many different preparations for herbs not involving alcohol. And I don't use tinctures or alcohol extracts very often myself. I more often prefer teas. That's kind of my number one way to use herbs. I'll also, depending on the herb, I might use them powdered. Well, maybe I should say my number one way to use herbs is actually as food too, especially this time of year with all these wild greens. So there's so many preparations that you can make not using alcohol. There are preparations that are made similarly to alcohol extracts, and sometimes people say that those are alcohol-free tinctures, but that's not technically true. But some of those include glycerite, which we mentioned. Glycerite is a very sweet substance and often used for making extracts for children because it's very sweet, tastes good. It's not as strong as alcohol in extracting things, but it's pretty strong, and it's really good at fixing tannins. And so certain herbs do better as glycerites than others. I like echinacea as a glycerite, chamomile, lemon balm. So some do really well. You can also use vinegar to extract plants. Again, this is a very different preparation. It is not similar to an alcohol extract, but it is one way of making medicine with plants, and one that I love. And you can use vinegar, like apple cider vinegar, to extract mineral-rich plants like nettles and plantain, chickweed, and violet's another one. And those vinegar extracts, they just really great at getting minerals out of the plant, which alcohol is not good at. So vinegar really excels. And there's all sorts of things you can do with that vinegar. It can be your salad dressing. You can mix it with honey to make what we call an oxymel. Lately, I've been drinking lots of oxymels. I take soda water and then add a little bit of an oxymel to it. We have in the book, there's evergreen oxymel and also violet oxymel, and both of those I love to add to a little bit of sparkling water as like a mocktail. It's so delicious. So there's lots of ways to make herbal medicine without alcohol. There's no way to really like entirely replicate a tincture, but tinctures are not necessary, and alcohol is not a necessary part of herbalism.
I actually do that a lot. I actually have it in the fridge here, where I take either an oxymel or an herbal syrup, and I just have a soda stream, and I got these nice bottles and clear bottles, and I just take it with me here, and I just pour it in there, put a little syrup, and just I have really cool. So I have a blackberry Damiana soda in the
nice
fridge back there, made with that syrup. That's pretty cool. A good question here. Can you use a recipe that we just talked about, glycerite, since we're just on that, with other herbs as well, or is it just echinacea?
Yeah, you can. And that particular recipe is measured out using the weight of the echinacea root that's fine, and something that's finely chopped. You can definitely use glycerites with other herbs, and that's actually something we put a lot of intention in with the book. Is like, we didn't want 10 glycerite recipes, or 10 alcohol extract recipes, or 10 vinegar recipes. So we kind of picked and chose our favorite herbs for different preparations. But with the idea being that like once you make echinacea glycerite, you can, use that with other plants. Or once you make a violet vinegar, that gives you the experience, then make a plantain vinegar or make a nettle vinegar. So that's kind of that multi-layered learning there that we do list within the plants, that you can use certain preparations for individual plants. But yeah, we just used certain plants to highlight different preparations.
There have been a few questions about how many plants are in the book. So we have 24 plants in the book. And yeah, like Rosalee was saying, even if there isn't a particular vinegar recipe for one of those plants, throughout the book, you're kind of seeing and getting experience with those different preparations. And so you can apply them to plants in the book or plants that aren't in the book as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you make the chickweed salve, you're going to be able to make calendula or plantain salve like that. Yeah. I like this question here. So I add rosehip and orange peel to my elderberry syrup for vitamin C benefits. Should I be concerned about vitamin C being cooked off if it gets too hot while simmering, or does it cook into the syrup? Any thoughts and tips on decocting separately and then adding to the end? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Questions like that make me wish I had a lab where I could test myself to see, like what's available and what's in there. The thing about vitamin C is it's a very delicate vitamin, and it does break down really readily. Can you hear that when cars drive by?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I'm like literally on the side of a road right now. I can show you later, but I didn't want to take the time to drive all the way to town, because that would be like another 15 minutes. So I'm just like on the side of the highway. Anyway, so
Herbalistic cars getting tea.
Totally. What were we talking about again? Vitamin C. So vitamin C is very delicate, and really the best way to get vitamin C is like straight off the bush, whether that's from citrus, from rose hips, or even so many of our greens, broccoli, kale, all of those are high in vitamin C. But there's studies done showing that even 24 hours after picking some of those plants, their vitamin C content is severely diminished. Cooking and heat also further degrades vitamin C. So if you're using dried plants and you're cooking it, I can't say how much vitamin C is really in there. We don't know because we don't have the labs. Sometimes people teach that all vitamin C is gone once it has been heated. I don't think that could be true because historically, during World War II, rose hips became a very important source of vitamin C for people in Europe. And I actually did a lot of research on that. It was really fun for the book. I read all of these newspapers from like 1943, 44, 45 in England. And I read all these announcements and talking about rose hips. And it was this huge volunteer effort for women and children, especially, harvesting rose hips. And all these small county newspapers would brag how many rose hips that their local organizations had harvested. And plants were plants that made, like factories that made other things, during those wartime efforts were now making rose hip syrup, and that was distributed widely. Because during the war, they weren't getting the citrus and stuff that was normally used, via, coming down from the more southern locations for their vitamin C. And so in that method, they were using fresh rose hips, but they were simmering the rose hips to make a syrup. And so I don't think that all the vitamin C must have been gone because they were using that regularly to help prevent vitamin C deficiency and things like scurvy. So that's, again, we don't have a lab in our homes to test the level of vitamin C, but I think that it must exist in those heated preparations. Another plant that's in the book, well, I don't know if we'd call it a plant, Emily, but we have a chapter on evergreens, and which is kind of all-encompassing of many different evergreen trees out there. Evergreens are very high in vitamin C, and those are something that not everybody, but those they grow more commonly near me than citrus, whereas Emily probably has more citrus than evergreens. But for those of us who live near evergreens, but those can be a great source of vitamin C as well.
And the evergreen oxynel looks good.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of roadside, so say if those just joining in, Rosalee's in her car. We started out in her house, but the electricity went out, so she jumped in the car with her cell phone and went down the road. There you go.
Yeah, yeah, that's the. I'm literally. I can show you. I'm like literally in my car on the side of a road.
Wow.
This is. I'm actually right next to the house that when I first moved here 15 years ago. I lived in that house down there with the blue roof.
Who knew 15 years later you'd be sitting in your car talking to.
Yeah, and it's too bright for me to take off my sunglasses, so instead of squinting at you, I have to use my sunglasses. But
there's a question. Just picked rosemary from the roadside, Sana, and was wondering if it was safe to use for non-ingestible purposes. What do you think, Emily?
Probably, I guess it would kind of depend on how busy that road was, whether how close to the road it was. I wouldn't use it for ingestible purposes. And I'm not sure what non-ingestible purposes you're thinking of, but if you're just using it for aroma or decoration or something, should be fine. We have had some questions about best way to clean plants when you harvest and gather them. So, I think I like to think that the less I can clean them or need to clean them, the better. Just because cleaning can do things like wash away some of those aromatic, essential oils that are in the plants. They can also, if you want to dry the plants or make other preparations with them, sometimes washing them will get them more wet, and then it's harder to dry them, or they're going to be more juicy if you want to infuse them in an oil or something like that. So the less I can wash them, the better. However, depending on where the plant has been growing and the plant part, if it's a root, then you definitely want to do a good scrub of those. I'll swish them around in a basin of water and use a scrub brush and get dirt off of roots. Leaves, just kind of like you would wash salad greens. Just rinse those off and dry them if you need to. Flowers, try to avoid washing as much as possible, just because they can be so delicate, and that can really kind of destroy the aromas of the flowers. So those, if flowers and leaves, if possible, then I'll just like shake them, just to try to shake off any dirt or insects or things like that. But if necessary, flowers, someone will take a little brush and just brush off any extra dirt or anything like that. So fruits, again, you can just rinse those with water. But I don't worry about doing things like washing them in a vinegar solution, or people even bleach. Sometimes people create these like solutions to wash things with, and I don't do any of that.
So I want to know, is there anywhere Timothy Scott Reeves, is there anywhere I can look at the table of contents? I imagine if you go on Amazon and look up the book, there's going to be a table of contents there, right? So pretty sure. Oh, can't hear you, Rosalee.
Yeah, sorry, I was muting myself while Emily was talking, so you didn't have to listen to the roadside.
All right.
Amazon does have quite a generous showing of those, especially the beginning chapters, and the table of contents included.
We got a question here from a Facebook user. If you have a lawn service, could you just do the front, and will the backyard be safe? Even if others around you use a service, mainly dried with a spreader, not a sprayer. Are you talking about the fact that they're using, like, are they killing weeds? Are they trying to kill the weeds? I mean, I would say don't use a lawn service, any lawn service, other than someone who's just cutting your yard. There's no need to. You can just cut your yard and it will stay. The grass or all the green plants will stay short, and you can choose an area that maybe you don't cut. Like I've cut around, like if I've seen patches of yarrow or my last yard, or plantain, just things growing naturally, or some clover. I'll just leave spots in my backyard where I can harvest. But I'm a person who, me personally, why I got into all this in the first place was that when I got into environmental issues and all, I noticed in the town I grew up in, that all the animals and were there weren't the same amount of bird song and animals was when I was growing up, and that was because ChemLawn happened in all those years. So there's really no need to do that. And I think the best thing to do is get a copy of Wild Remedies, start learning about dandelion, make a lot of things with dandelion, start educating your neighbors and tell them to stop using their lawn services. Then you don't have to worry about it. But I would say just stop using a lawn service unless you just get some money you're cutting your yard. That's my passionate opinion about that, because that's what got me in the all. Because anything chemical sprays that you're putting on your yard, it's killing wildlife, it's hurting our children, it's hurting ourselves. And ironically, Roundup's number one enemy, dandelion. Dandelion will help your liver after you've used all the Roundup and damaged it. Dandelion's actually going to heal you from the damage that people use with Roundup. So dandelion, so loathed, yet it's one of the most healing plants on the planet. So there you go. That's my opinion. Sorry, I just had to say that. So let's see. Would it be, speaking of dandelions, would it be preferable to freeze dandelion heads rather than dry them in order to use them out of season?
I randomly actually have frozen dandelion flowers. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, though. I think there's something they're great fresh, they're best fresh. And then, just to use them when in season. And there's something so special about that. Emily and I talk about that a lot, just when we share recipes and stuff, that you can only have something for a short period of time makes them all that more special. But I have frozen them. What I did one year is I was really excited to make dandelion mead, and I couldn't harvest enough flowers at once to make them. And so I harvested them and ended up freezing them. And then I didn't actually get around to making the mead until like December. But I did make dandelion mead out of frozen petals, and it worked great. So you could definitely try that out. They don't dry well at all. Dandelion seed heads, they when you harvest them, or when you harvest the flowers rather, they immediately go to seed. Like John was showing his cake earlier, and he had the picture with Haley in it the night before, had dandelion flowers all around it as whole flowers, which looked really pretty. But within hours, they aren't going to look pretty anymore when you leave them as entire flower heads. So best to use them fresh, but sure, try them frozen and let us know how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Calendula flowers freeze well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the cousin. We were just talking about usnea as a featured herb on Herb Mentor, herbmentor.com. You can go check that out. It's our membership site. I have dried usnea and would like to make a tincture and an herbal infusion. I hope to pick fresh off soon from the down branches from the heavy winds we have in upstate New York. So how would you use dried usnea to make your tincture? Or would you make an herbal infusion with usnea? I never heard of that. I mean, other than for a medicinal reason.
Yeah, I've never used usnea as a tea. I assume you can, but you can use it as a tincture. It's commonly used like that. On the monograph on Herb Mentor, I talk about how to do it because it's kind of a special preparation. That's one of the few tinctures that we use heat to prepare it. And there's all different kinds of ways. Herbalists have all sorts of ways to add heat to the tincture making process. It's kind of a bit problematic because adding heat to alcohol can be kind of explosive, literally. So you want to be careful with that. But people do things like doing a hot water bath in the crock pot, or making their tincture and then putting it in a tightly sealed jar and then putting it in their dishwasher as they just wash their dishes, and they have the hot water and using that a couple times. So there's all sorts of different ways, but that one is believed to be better with the heat. The plant actually needs the heat from the preparation to pull out all of its goodies.
Cool. Yes. Is there a list of plants? That would have been a really good idea. To put a list of plants in the website. There's just so much to do, but no, you can click over on like Amazon or wherever, and I'm sure look at a table of contents and you'll see the list of plants. But they're lovely plants. Well,
yeah, let's talk about that, Emily.
Yeah.
So we chose the plants in the book because like on a kind of a varying criteria. But number one was that we wanted them to be widely available for most people in northern, in temperate regions, I guess we'd say. And we wanted, we chose herbs that we have relationships with, because we didn't want to, write about herbs. Like I couldn't write about herbs only found on the East Coast because I've never foraged them or worked with them. But we very purposely chose very common plants. And we also chose some that you can forage, but people can also find pretty readily in the grocery store. Things like blackberry, apple, citrus, those are all mint. Those are all things you can forage, but also available for the grocery store for people who might not want to forage. And one thing about the book that's really important to Emily and I is that the book isn't necessarily just about the 24 plants that are in the book. The book is about a transformative journey, and there's a lot of skills presented in the book that go so far beyond just facts about certain plants. So while we definitely did our best to choose 24 very commonly found plants, and also to make them very inclusive to people of varying different levels of foraging or even physical abilities, we also really wanted the book to be so much more than those simple plants, so that people can read that book and read Wild Remedies and get so much out of it. And the skills presented in that book can then be used to address all sorts of plants that grow near people, so that ultimately, although it's not a bioregional book, it can then be applied bioregionally. And we have lots of exercises and journal prompts to help people move that information from the pages of the book and really apply that to the plants that are around them. What do you think, Emily?
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well. I was seeing another question about, do we cover plant parts in the book? And yeah, again, the particular plants in the book, there are roots and there are leaves and flowers and different parts for the particular plants. And then we also talk about generally ways to harvest different plant parts, and general best times of year, also how to clean different plant parts. And then we have a whole chapter on botany, which can be very can feel really intimidating, if you're a newbie. But we really try to break it down in a way that makes it very simple. And so we do have things like, kind of like different ways to describe like leaves and flowers and things like that, so that when you're reading descriptions, to be able to identify the plants, that can be simplified for you.
We even start with plant ID in the grocery store too.
Yes,
so we really try to start from
looking at the leaves in the grocery store and stuff like that, and or any flowers around you, even if it's not something that's edible or medicinal or that you're planning to pick, but just to get to know those patterns of how things look. And then that's really how you start to kind of build on that and then be able to identify the plants around you. Another thank you to Karen and Lee too for fielding all these questions in the background. Another one that I saw has been asked quite a bit is how long or how many years are dried herbs good for medicine making? I have some a number of years old in jars. So I would say, as a general rule of thumb, maybe a year or two, but really it's using your senses is the best way to tell if they're still good, if they're still potent. So give them a smell. Do they still smell fragrant? Looking at them, do they still look fresh and vibrant? If they've been exposed to a lot of light or something, then the color might have been faded, and so you can look at that. How do they taste? So really, sometimes depending on how the herb's stored or just how it was processed, then might be 6 months or it could be 5 years. So really use your senses to determine that. Let's see. I think there was another one about how long will a tincture last in the fridge. Rosalee, what do you think of that?
Well, generally tinctures or alcohol extracts aren't kept in the fridge. I don't think that's really necessary because the alcohol is a really wonderful preservative. And so there's kind of varying thoughts on how long they last, but the answer is generally years, many, many years. And again, like Emily was saying with senses, that's the best way to know is to taste it. And it can take a little bit of know-how there, but if you tasted it when it was fresh and can kind of pull that back from your memory and then taste it now, and does it taste like the plant it's supposed to taste like, or does it have kind of a, I don't know, bland alcohol taste, for example? So, if something's aromatic, you want it definitely to have those aromatics come through. But yeah, so definitely taste is the best way, but they can last for a very long time. It's one of the advantages to tincture.
Well, you're
Thanks,
looking
Dale.
happy in the shade.
I know, I feel bad that I'm in them, but I tried to take them off earlier, and I said,
well, people are enjoying. They're
right.
saying they can see the reflection of where you are in them. There's a lot of great.
It's really beautiful out there. I wish you could see behind me. I have like snow-covered peaks out there. It's
that blue
nice.
sky is pretty.
Yeah.
There's another question about Melissa Officinalis, lemon balm. Read that it doesn't hold its properties once it's dried and to use it fresh. Is that right? That's something that I heard for so long and just assumed was true. And then I had some that I had dried, and it was kind of like in the back of a drawer. And I don't know how long it was that I pulled it out, but it was still like super, vibrant. Again, using my own senses. It smelled great. It tasted great. And so, it's maybe in general it's best to use fresh, but it's not necessarily a blanket rule.
I like this.
Yeah, you could never remove my dried lemon balm from my apothecary. I rely on it all winter long.
Oh gosh. Let's see here. So
I want to just say something what Emily was talking about. Henriette Kress, wonderful herbalist, who's had the first herbal website ever in the 90s, and wonderful source of information. And she has a saying that's just so great. She says, "Herbs don't read books." And it's so true. Like oftentimes, like we can come up with these rules about plants, but they weren't necessarily following our rules. And it's really easy for someone to say something one time and then for that to be just repeated over and over again. There's also obviously a lot of wisdom out there too, and there's a reason why we have traditional historical knowledge, because that is rooted in wisdom. But nothing beats trying things for yourself. Just like Emily said, it's like she happened to have dried, she'd heard it was only good fresh, but she had it anyway, so she tried it and found out, wow, this is great. And that's happened to me so many times. I've heard that story over and over again, which is why, that in itself is why I think personal experience is so important. And what all of my teachings, and definitely Wild Remedies, is based in is, creating your own experiences. Absolutely, gain wisdom from others, learn what there is out there. But in the end, you got to try it for yourself and see what you think. Like I was talking about echinacea earlier. I have my favorite ways of using echinacea. There are very, knowledgeable, experienced herbalists out there who have their own way of making echinacea. So it's really just not one way or another. It really comes down to figuring out what works for you.
That was it reminds me of a question that I saw here where I can't find it to highlight it, but someone was asking, like, how do you remember all this information? So yes, Rosalee and Emily are very smart. But what's the real secret to remember?
I just ask Emily.
Because I asked you. Hey, Rosalee, how do you use Ustia? Hey, Emily, John wants to know how to use Ustia.
Now we have a book we can look it up in.
That's helpful.
That's why you write the book, right? So you can remember everything that you're. No, but what about that?
I think it's through using them in your daily life, because you could read all kinds of things, but unless you actually practice it, then it could be hard to remember. So it's like it's making that dinner with those dandelion leaves, or making that tincture, and it's just that process of using it in your life that for me is how I remember it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's that repetition, and there's some things in herbalism that I've had to like literally memorize, for whatever reason. Like I can tell you the minerals and vitamins that are found in dandelion leaves because I took the time to like actually memorize that. But that's kind of like the most boring information. I know so much more about dandelion based on the time I've spent with it out in the field, the times I've harvested it, the times I've eaten it, and like that information will never leave my mind. That's rooted in experience. And so yeah, I think we've all had that experience where you like read a paragraph and you're like, wait, what was that? And you have to read it again. And sometimes if your mind is off in the clouds, you have to read it many times. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, what was that again? And so that's kind of like information in, information out. But when you have those experiences, that's becomes yours forever.
And your mind has like a it has a place for the information to stick. So I used to do this where I'd go and harvest something or make a remedy, and then I would try to learn like one new thing at that time. So I'd be like, oh, I'm making this thing with, I picked dandelion flowers for this cake, or my daughter did. But say I'm gonna now look up and try to remember one more thing. And that's one thing. And and this is someone shared this, that Linda, that she has some calendula growing on her balcony. That was, I remember too, we lived in this apartment and I wanted to learn about growing calendula. So I just got some containers, and I have video of Rowan, my son who's almost 21, in a diaper when he first started talking, leaning over on the edge of the container, planting like calendula seeds. And it's one of our, great memories. But I wanted to ask Emily that Wild Remedies is also for folks in urban areas, right? And I know you like to make sure that people understand that. Can you speak to the fact that these are accessible to, and that was a big part of you creating this book, was accessibility to folks in urban areas?
Yeah, I think because I live in an urban area myself and have for many years relied on I would grow plants, like you said, on my balcony or in a garden. And it's not, it's not always, the plants may not grow around me or may not be safe to harvest them or ethical to harvest them in some cases. So yeah, for every plant in the book, we included gardening tips, and a lot of them are really easy to grow in a garden. Someone had asked if you could plant your own yarrow and mullein. And yes, I have planted both of those. And I know someone had asked about seeds too. And if you go to the back of the book, there's a link for a resources section, and we list several different sources for plants and seeds, but strictly medicinal seeds is one that I have used very much and highly recommend for getting seeds. So yeah, a lot of, most of these plants can be easily grown in containers, in a raised bed, in a larger garden if you have one. Another good place to find plants is, if people that do have yards, that some of the, a lot of these are just considered weeds. And so it's often, they will be happy for you to come and take their weeds off of their hands. Also local organic farms can be a good source to find plants. So there are a lot of ways to find plants, if not just growing in the wild where you live.
If you have, farmers markets have become a bigger and bigger thing, and if the great place to meet the vegetable farmers is at those, and they might, and you might, if you get to know that person at the market, you could ask them, hey, I'm learning about herbs, and there's these plants like chickweed and all. Can I walk around your farm and check it out? And they might. We did that for years. That's my chickweed, the lamb's quarter, so many. Because someone was talking about their neighbors spraying and whatnot, and if you think their neighbors' chemicals are blowing, can't see your yard or how that's going, then maybe that's not the best place to gather, and maybe you could go find, if you can, a local farm, because they're happy to get to know you. And to our farm eventually started adding the chickweed and lamb's quarter into the boxes, into their CSA boxes, because they saw us picking it all the time. We're like, what? So they actually started adding it. So yeah. So there's this question here I saw a couple times about dead nettle. Do you use purple dead nettle? Either of you? I didn't know you could. I just wanted to put this up because I was curious. What's the best way?
People do. It doesn't grow around me, so I don't have personal experience with it.
I have it all over right now because this is when it's coming up, and sometimes you're like, what is that? Some kind of kind of like at first glance it looks like it's self-heal coming up, like, because it looks like self-heal does later, like with the purple at the top. I don't know, Rosalee? I have no idea.
It doesn't grow near me either. So
all right. I just never used it.
I did
just to illustrate that not everyone knows everything. It's all we all learn stuff as we're going along.
The Nerdy Farm Wife website, I think, just had a salve recipe with purple dead nettle, so you might want to look that.
And that's the fun of it too. Like, just because we don't use it doesn't mean that you can't start a journey and figuring out what it is and picking it, and you do some research and it may become one of your favorite healing plants. Who knows? It's in the mint family. It's not actually a nettle. That much I know. Let's see.
Someone was asking a good question for Rosalee, I think. Could you
Yeah.
address how to tell what kind of constitution you have? Hot, cold, wet, or dry?
Meaning to do that right
We're
now?
going to be here all day.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like both easy and complicated. That is the main focus of my book, Alchemy of Herbs, as well as my online course, A Taste of Herbs. And so, that there's definitely a lot of layers to unearth in that. We do include energetics, which is basically looking at whether a plant is cooling or drying or warming or moistening. We do include that information in Wild Remedies, so that's woven throughout, because I can't imagine using herbs without thinking about that. But yeah, so that's kind of a big question for a short recap. But essentially, your constitution is looking at if you tend to be more warming or cooling, or if you tend to be more drying or moistening. And the best way to really get in touch with that is just by observation. And in Alchemy of Herbs, I have a quiz that people can take. It's a very short quiz. I don't have it memorized though, but basically looking at how you can determine those qualities in yourself. So for example, there's people out there who they just always tend to feel cold. They're the ones that have a sweater on when other people are in t-shirts, or they know that they wouldn't want to be without an extra pair of socks wherever they might go because they might need them, or they have the extra jacket on. But they often have an extra blanket at night. All those symptoms of being feeling more cold than others. So somebody who had those tendencies would have a colder constitution, versus people who are the opposite. There are furnaces. They are in the t-shirts when most people are in sweaters. They don't like a lot of blankets at night. It can be seen in people's preferences for weather. Somebody loves the coolness of winter, or they love the heat of summer, etc. So that it's very simple. It's not hard, but it does take some observation, just a little bit of knowledge to kind of start thinking about those different energies and how you see them. In Ayurveda and in Chinese medicine, that it becomes more and more complex. And even in Western herbalism, we start to peel back the layers. But the way I like to teach it is that those simple qualities at first: warm, dry, and cool, moist, and just getting to know those basics can really bring you a long way in the constitution realm. Is that a good summary for now?
Yeah.
Kind of somewhat related, maybe, is we're being asked, how did the two of us meet?
No, yeah, that's a good story.
Oh,
Yeah, it was like, oh, John. I'm in my car on the side of a road. Meanwhile, John's comfortable and eating cake. You enjoy that, John.
So good. Oh, it's
I believe it.
flourless, by the way. It's the gluten-free version.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's 2012, and I had just had this idea. It just came to me out of nowhere. But it was a very clear vision that I wanted to take energetic herbalism and the 5 tastes of herbs and put it into a chart form that could be like an easy reference guide. And so I sketched it out in, with a pencil, and it was very, very raw. But the ideas were there, and I had all these different layers of it and everything. But it was ugly. To be honest, it was not pretty. And it was just my, pencil sketchings. And I actually went onto Facebook and I said, I have this, thing that I need to be put into a graphic of some kind. Is there anybody out there who might be able to help me with this? And there was Emily. And we had a mutual friend, so I kind of, knew who she was a little bit. And yeah, and that was kind of like the first project. So she made the first, so that later became the Taste of Herbs flavor wheel, which a lot of you are probably familiar with. So Emily helped me create that and bring that vision to life. And that was just the beginning. We started working together a couple months after that and haven't stopped. So I think, since 2012, we've been been working together. And then Learning Herbs was looking for somebody, and I was like, Emily is the perfect person. And so Emily, how long have you been working with Learning Herbs now?
That's a good question. Maybe 6 years.
6 years. So yeah, we've been together 8 years, and then been working together at Learning Herbs for 6 years. And yeah, and then 2.5 years ago, I called up Emily and I said, I just had this vision for this book, and it's going to be, it's a book about foraging, but really it's about nature connection and getting to know your local area and really learning all about reciprocity and how to tend to wild plants, and getting to know the land where you live. And I just, told her all these aspects of the book, and she's like, oh, that sounds great. That sounds great. And I was like, and we're going to write it together. There was a long pause after that. And
didn't expect that one.
yeah, she wasn't expecting that. We had both written our books. Emily's written Wild Drinks and Cocktails. She wrote that book in 2 months, including photography, right? It was just like this incredible feat. I remember we were friends, and I remember like she didn't go to Thanksgiving or Christmas or anything that year. Any holiday celebrations during that time you did not go to, because that's how much it took. And the book is amazing. And I wrote Alchemy of Herbs. I had a longer time, but both of us wrote our first books and said, we'll never write another book. Like, we had no interest. Yeah, never doing that again. Happy to have our first books, but didn't feel the need to be an author and keep putting out books, I guess. But yeah, I just had that vision, and I knew I would never write this book without Emily. I mean, the second I had the vision for the book, the next second was and I'll do it with Emily, because I knew it would never happen without her. And yeah, there was a long pause, and then she said, well, I'll think about it. But she told me later that she knew that was
there was no way I was going to say no, but I had to just do the prudent thing and say, I'll give it some thought.
Yeah, but we had discussions along these lines for years. We talked about these things, and so it was just a very natural partnership for the book.
What's the next book?
Well, let's just say I asked Emily about our next book, and she's still thinking about it. She also might have said no, but I'm not taking that as an answer yet.
Too soon.
Yeah, she said too soon. So it's simmering on the back burner, and I will just keep, dropping that idea along to her until she says yes.
So Nicole, I don't know, this be available to watch later. It'll just keep on whatever feed you're watching it on, so you can go back to YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are, and you can just go down the feed, and we'll keep this posted. And thanks, Connie, for your kind words. Somebody was asking about self-heal earlier, about in the throat throat spray. What are the self-heal flowers in the recipe? What are those?
Yeah, there's kind of a story behind that one. So Emily and I, we were really, how do we say this? We wrote a lot for this book. And then when we turned it in, we were way over word count. What was that, Emily?
Somehow, we weren't paying any attention to word count as we were writing.
We weren't. Yeah, we did not. We were using a different thing. It didn't automatically show it, and we just weren't paying attention. And so our word count was way over. And right as we were finishing the book too, we bundled it all together to hand it to the editor, and they were like, "No, that's not going to work. It's way too much." And so then that was a very painful process. We had to cut plants out of the book, and we had done this really cool thing where we had integrated recipes using plants from the book. So it wasn't just it wasn't just an echinacea recipe in this, for this example, it's echinacea and I believe yarrow and self-heal is in that recipe. And so self-heal was one of the chapters that got cut. And as a result, we thought we would have to cut that recipe too, which I was very sad about, because that is one of my top recipes for the whole book. I've just been relying on that, for almost 2 years now since I made the recipe for this book, and I love that recipe so much. And it just felt like those 3 herbs just went together so well. And anyway, I was very sad that was going to be cut from the book. And so what we decided to do was give you some bonus chapters, because we wrote those chapters, and they got cut. So at the back of the book, there's a link where you can download 3 bonus chapters, and self-heal is one of them. And so you can learn all about self-heal. It's a wonderful weed, loves to grow in lawns. I often see it growing next to plantain. I think they kind of like a similar place. Yeah, there it is. And yeah, it's a non-aromatic mint, so it's in the mint family, but it's doesn't have aromatics. But one of my favorite weeds to use. It's so versatile. You can use it in so many different ways. You can, make some wonderful tea, make some wonderful oil infusion. I love it for my skin. And then you can also use it for things like the Flower Power throat spray.
Nice. Michelle asks, they have horsetail. Doesn't matter what variety. I don't trust my yard directly next to the house or driveway, but that's where it grows. That's when my eye picked up because I lived in an area and around here there's a lot of horsetail, and I definitely wouldn't harvest. I would go, somewhere that just isn't around any roads because it does absorb a lot of water and whatnot. So definitely wouldn't use that. And it's interesting. I don't know what you two know, but it's a little while since I did research in horsetail and all, but I don't know. It's a matter of varieties, but it's like there's like male plants or female spore plants, or they're different kinds. And I always would get the one that has the almost looks like pine needles and coming out of it versus like the other kinds. And someone told me once that when you see them coming up and their arms are up like this, that they're saying, pick me, pick me, pick me. But over time, they get older and their arms start to droop down, and then they're older and older. And then you're just like, nah, leave me alone, leave me alone. Something that's stuck in my mind about the type anyway that I would. But and do you have horsetail experience? I don't know if you do in LA at all, right? It's a little dry.
No.
Yeah. But you lived over on this side, Rosalee. You probably.
And it grows on my property, actually.
Oh, it goes on your property, right?
Yeah, down by the pond. Yeah, so I'm similar. I like to harvest it when it's young. I never have to harvest very much of it because I use it in very small amounts. I like to add pinches of it to my nourishing herbal infusion. So I'll make a nettle infusion and add just a pinch of horsetail to that. It's really high in minerals, and so the side effects include things like stronger fingernails and luxurious hair. But it's used in such small amounts that I don't ever harvest all that much of it. I don't really need to.
We would put it.
I agree. I like it when it's younger.
We would make a vinegar with it, and we mix that into some of our other vinegar. We made a multi-mineral rich vinegar combining different dandelion root and burdock root and that, and put in together and then take that vinegar, and that would be a basis for the whole winter salad dressing, pretty much.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Yeah.
Nice, easy way to get your minerals. Free mineral supplements. Just use apple cider vinegar. Let's see.
There have been several questions about violets. Some people saying that they're wondering if they grow in LA, and then also someone saying something that looks very much like violets is growing in my garden. Is there a poisonous plant that looks similar? And if I ate it, how sick might I get? So the LA question, yeah, we tend not to have wild violets growing here. There are garden violets, and I managed to find some at a garden store. And I do also grow, some people are asking about the viola Johnny jump ups, and I grow those as well. And then if you're seeing something in your garden that looks like violets, and there are some poisonous plants that look similar to violets, some lookalikes. And that's another thing we include in the book, some common lookalikes for a lot of the plants that you want to look out for. So you definitely want to be 100% positive of your identification before you eat something, and not knowing what it could be. I wouldn't know how sick you might get, but yeah, not something that you want to risk. The question.
Yeah, for violet, they're one of the lookalikes can be aconite or monkshood. That's like a deadly poisonous plant. Unlikely to be in someone's garden unless they planted a toxic plant there, but commonly grows in the alpines all over here. And when it's young, it can be mistaken for that. So definitely that's one of our most poisonous plants out there. So always got to know exactly what it is. But once you know it, that's it's in that, it's in you forever. Once you start recognizing plant patterns, it's not like when you first start, it might feel strange or difficult, and everything might look green. When I first started, everything just was green. There was small green, middle green, big green. But you really, once you start seeing those patterns, you can become more and more confident. And one thing we did include in the book is we did include the most common poisonous plants in North America. But we also really recommend that you get a field guide for your area and you get to know the poisonous plants of your area, because you really want to know those. That's something I learned back in the day from Wilderness Awareness School and John Young. Know your hazards first. And you get to know your hazards, and you can be a lot more comfortable, spreading out from there. So.
Which can be done fairly quickly. There's not that many poisons.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, we recommend journaling them. Speaking of journal, you didn't happen to grab that when you left the house in a hurry. So Rosalee had all these nice props and show and tell set up for her next to her, and she had to run out. The internet went out, and now she's in her car. But there is a journal that comes with the Wild Remedy. So I just put the URL on the screen because somebody was asking, a lot of people were asking, where do I get the book? And just go to Wild Remedies book. And the reason why you want to go there is because we'll link you over to where to buy it on different online bookstores you can choose. But when you go back there, you get all the bonuses. So you register your book, then you have the bonuses, which is really cool. And a little tip right now, you may want to check out, like when you see the links on Wild Remedies book, you may want to check out Barnes & Noble or this other one, Books A Million or whatever, because Amazon has like long shipping times right now. Now, I'm told by the publisher that it's going to come a lot faster than what it says there, because somehow their company is hooked in with Penguin, and the Penguin shipping some other way. And so it says that, but it's actually coming faster, but they can't like control what it says on Amazon. However, I don't know that, like when, I can't tell you exactly when, but Barnes & Noble can work, and people are getting their books fast that way too. The journal. There was so you talk about it a little. I'll put a picture on the screen.
Yeah, so I hadn't forgotten about the journal, but we have the Wild Remedies Facebook group, and people have started posting about the journal, and they're so excited. And I've been so thinking about like the bonuses that you get, kind of externally when you buy the book, that I kind of forgot about the journal, and people are so excited about it. So I wanted to talk about it today. So Emily and I, we really wanted Wild Remedies to be an action guide, and kind of how we've been talking about already. The book has 24 very common plants, but the idea is that you learn skills from these plants and skills from the book, but then you get to apply that to all the plants that grow around near you. And again, we wanted it to be an action guide, so we didn't want it to be about passively learning anything, but really about gaining your own experience and your own confidence. And so part of what makes it an action guide is that throughout the book, we have journal prompts and exercises for people to do, so that, again, it really becomes people's own experience. And there's a lot of those. Oh, how pretty. There's a lot of journaling prompts and exercises that you can do. And, the book is very pretty, and there's not a lot of space on it, for people to write it. So we thought, we should make that be, an extra thing. So our friend Jenny designed this, and it's just gorgeous. And there's 59 pages in the journal, and it's just a great way to like get all of the journals and exercise prompts that are in the book is basically extracted into this. And so when you buy the book, if you already have it, it's on page, 14, but it's the Roman numeral. So it's like XIV. There's the URL is in there. So you can go to that URL and get that, download the journal. And we put a lot of thought into the journal. It's beautiful. The top cover, is pretty, and it's pretty print heavy or color heavy. But after that, we were very particular that there's not a lot of ink involved. So it's really easy, if you can print out the first page or not. But after that, there's very little ink involved. It's really just kind of but it's well done. There's lots of bugs. It's Emily's contribution there. Lady beetles and hoverflies and all sorts of lovely things amongst the pages. So that's like this whole other thing that you get when you get the book, 60 pages of journaling. And if you don't have a printer, depending on how things open up, you can take it to some place like Staples or Office Max in the future and get it printed there. You can also just use a book. You can also just use a notebook to do your journaling. It doesn't have to be this journal per se, but we wanted people to have options. So.
And somebody asked to get the bonus chapters if they purchase from Amazon. Yes, because you list the URL in the back of the book.
Yeah, everybody gets bonuses wherever.
Yeah,
wherever.
But the bonuses on Wild. So let me share my screen. I'll put. Let's see here. I'm gonna take a second, and just so for people who may Remedies on the fly here. So if I go over here to stop screen, and then I share my screen again, and then I go to application window. Okay, so I'm going to show you here. This is wildremediesbook.com. And what you do is this explains what the book is, and you think you probably know what that is, but it has all the bonuses that we give you here, the docu-series, really cool labels that we made too, that you could print out and on Avery labels, or you can put them on paper and tape them on. Wild Spring Feast webinar, that's a great one. You get that too. Lots of other stuff. And by the way, we didn't get a chance to show you this because Rosalee had all the pieces. She has, like, literally the one in her house is the one that somebody's gonna win on Tuesday. And if we want you, see, the thing is we love if you order the book like today would be great, but definitely by Monday. And the reason is, like, that's the week that they count for like bestseller lists, and maybe we can make it. I don't know. It'd be cool. So to entice you, we have a drawing for a gift basket, and you could see that gift basket right here, and you could still get in on the gift basket drawing by registering. So how that works is you just go to, sorry, it's probably a little glitchy here on your thing, but there's 2 steps, and you just order from your bookseller, or if you're international, you just click that, and then you can see the international ones, and you click, it takes you, and you just order, and then you come back here, and you just put your name and email and where you purchase, like Amazon, and you just click get your bonus. And when you do that, you're going to go to let's see, oopsie, I lost everybody here. Oh, it's still there. You get instant access to the hub, and then the hub in the is really cool. And then you're going to get all your bonuses right there as soon as you register. All right, cool. So where was I? I'm going to take that there. So yeah, so that's just wildremediesbook.com. And we just love if you pick up a copy now, because it's so awesome. You're going to want to get that eventually. So even though it's a little slower right now on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you order now, and we have these bonuses will keep you busy. We have the videos, and you have plenty to watch. We've got videos on certain plants, like a whole video on mullein and yarrow and plantain. There's 2 webinars posted there, one on edible, like making your wild spring feast, and one on herbal antivirals that we just did the other day. So you could plenty to keep you busy if you have to wait a week or 2 or so for the book. That's kind of, we designed it that way because, but yeah.
Another good idea to order it now, besides just being just a really big week for us, and so the book purchases before Monday, as John said, are really important. But Emily and we're going to be hosting a book discussion. So the sooner you get your book, the better, because as I was talking about earlier, we want Wild Remedies to be an action guide. We don't want it to be, just passive. We want to really see people using the book and getting the most out of it. And so we're going to be hosting a discussion group as well. So want to have your books in hand so you can be a part of that.
Question was, we'll publish in electronic format. Yeah, and you can get Kindle or Nook or wherever you buy books. You can get that.
It's also an audiobook as well.
There's an audiobook, and that's a great story. You both, like, it was like the week we were starting the pre-order launch, and you both had to go in the studio and spend a week in recording. It's your voices, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Have you heard it? Have you? I should get it. I want to listen to it.
That sounds painful. You know how it is.
I don't know that I ever will. But yeah. But no, glad that it's there for people.
So the discussion group, someone was asking when you're hosting a discussion group, is that the cool thing that you're going to be doing in May?
Yes.
That's the cool
Okay,
thing.
I don't even know about this yet. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I haven't heard this.
Yeah.
But that'll be happening on the Facebook group, but we'll announce that later.
Yeah.
But you get access to
We're
Facebook
still formulating all of that. As John said, we haven't even told him yet. So
yeah, it's new. We formulate,
but it's happening. It's happening.
And that's the other thing. If you even have to wait a little for the book to come in the mail, like you get instant access today to the Facebook group, you can start discussing and whatnot. That comes for people. It's an extra bonus we don't list, but people have been loving this community. It's like a pop-up group we're doing for a couple months. I don't know about PDF. Someone was asking. We're not the publishers. That's the Hay House. And Penguin distributed, so we don't control that. We do control the bonuses and things when we're promoting it, but the book itself and anything to do with that, Hay House, or if you order it, we don't control that part. It's not LearningHerbs actually producing and selling it. It's Hay House. Trying to find that thing on the screen so I can take it off. There it is. So send confirmation to purchase where, please. I don't know what that means.
There are several questions about mallow or malva. One, are there any look-alike species that resemble malva neglecta? Can globe mallow be used in the quinoa mallow recipe in the book? And then can one use malva flowers instead of malva leaves in the Healthy Lungs tea? So as far as I know, I can't think of any real look-alike species, particularly poisonous look-alikes. I don't know, Rosalee, can you think of any? We didn't have any in the book. Again, you always want to be 100% sure that, what you're looking at, the plant you have, you can identify, but no like real alarm bells, about something to pay attention to. You can use other mallow species. As far as I know, in the Malvaceae family, cotton is the only one with studied negative effects from ingestion. So, and can you use the flowers instead of the leaves? You could, yeah. Anything else to add about mallow, Rosalee?
Then asked about, or did you already say globe mallow?
Yeah.
I was being distracted by all the cool comments that are something on the screen. Yeah, but as Emily said, most of them can be used similarly. They have varying levels of that mucilaginous or demulcent quality. So as long as you are 100% certain of the identification, then I recommend tasting them and just kind of feeling that in your mouth, like how slimy does it feel? Mm-hmm. And the flowers can be used. Some malva flowers are quite large. Malva neglecta flowers are quite tiny, and they're not super mucilaginous. So I like the leaves and the roots better in that case. But there's definitely lots to explore with mallow. I feel like mallow is an underappreciated herb, and I would love to see more and more people using it, because as people use it and have their own experiences that they can share, it can kind of add to the collective wisdom that we have of the plant. So looking forward to that one getting the appreciation it deserves.
A lot of people asking about this recording. It's just going to be on, if you're watching, you're on Facebook, Summer Joe. So that it's going to be on the Facebook page where you're watching it from. So yes, you can check it there later, or YouTube if you're watching it on YouTube. All right. Oh, here's one. Do you know which herbs may be native to the Puget Sound area? That's where I live. So, and I put this, I just put this up because this is really a question for you, for anyone. So this, fill in the blank, Puget Sound area, Arizona, Florida, New York. What are your recommendations for how to find the native plants of your area? Emily.
Right, yeah,
I was like, if I'm quiet, maybe Emily will just jump in.
I just assumed Rosalee was going to start on that one.
I don't know.
That's actually part of the book. Is we do give ideas and prompts for finding out plants that grow near you, especially native plants, but any plants really. So you can find field guides that are particular to your area. In the United States, there's the Native Plant Society, which have chapters all over the states and different counties and everything, and they can be a really great source of information for native plants. The local, museums, like in my town, we have an interpretive center that has a lot about native plants, but any kind of, local museums that grow near or that have they're near you might have information on which plants grow near you. How about you, Emily?
Yeah, I think those are all really good sources.
And also, looking out for herbalists that might be in your areas. Herbalists love to give plant walks, and so you might be able to find a local herbalist. The Native Plant Society, they often they love to do field trips, is what they call them, and so and they're often free, just free field trips out to look at the plants, and that's a great way to get to see those plants near you.
And I think people watching this should set a goal for themselves too, because it wasn't that long after I started taking classes and learning that somebody asked me to do a plant walk. So it could be that you're going to, learn about what's in your area, learn about the native plants, learn about these plants, and volunteer, offer your knowledge to local groups to do a walk. And then that's sort of where, if I didn't do that one time, that eventually led in a weird way to learning herbs happening to everyone watching this right now, and this book being all these books being in existence. If I just didn't one day just go, yeah, okay, I'll give you a walk on this, I'll talk about it a little bit, but then I was like, oh, that was fun, and then I started doing another one, then I started teaching classes, and then I made this website, and then this all happened. so you never know where it's going to go when you put your passion out there in the world. So totally recommend it. Yeah, it's great. Here's a question from Catherine. What type of jars are best to store dried herbs and flowers in? Is amber best?
Well, you definitely want to keep the herbs away from light as much as possible. So amber jars can be great for that, for blocking out the light. I personally don't use amber jars. Just use kind of like the regular mason jars, but try to keep the herbs in a darker location, whether it's a cupboard or a lower shelf or a darker room. You want the jars to be airtight because oxygen or moisture or other things that can degrade the herbs inside. So as long as you've got a jar with a good tight seal, and keep it away from things like sunlight and moisture, and then you should be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing about those colored jars is getting a pure amber glass is really great. They can be kind of pricey. But a few years ago, canning jar companies started coming out with all these really pretty colored jars, including the dark amber. And I was so excited for them, and I bought a whole bunch, and not long afterwards, they started chipping off, the color started chipping off. And so just to be cautious of that. I don't know, I know the amber jars are becoming more popular, and I'm just not sure, are those actually amber glass, or are they glass been painted somehow? So definitely in that situation, you just want plain old glass as opposed to something that's going to wear off and chip away, because you definitely don't want that in your plants.
This question here, just about the book on a credit card. I'm just bringing this up because Rosalee, talk about what you did with your local bookstore. You could ask a local bookstore to carry the book, right?
Yeah, definitely. Local bookstores is a great way to get it, and any bookstore can order it in. This is published by a major publishing company, distributed by Penguin, so great distribution. So it can be ordered in to your local bookstore, and my local bookstore right now is closed for obvious reasons, but they're doing curbside pickup, and so you can call in, talk to a person, or you can order online, order your book, and then you just schedule when you're going to pick it up, and they have it there at the curbside for you. So you might be able to do that with your local bookstore if they happen to be closed right now as well.
There's two bookstores right here. There's one downstairs here and one across the street, and they both have signs saying, if you want a book, just call here and we'll arrange a pickup. So I don't know. I know bookstores for a lot of people can be a rare thing too, depending on where you live. So I'm not sure. All right. So any other questions? Wow, we've been on for 2 hours. There's 500 people still on here. That's not even YouTube plus YouTube. Maybe there's more than. Are the old blue jars, the blue ball jars? Okay, the blue jars. Okay.
Yeah,
I
again, if
think
you're talking
so.
about the
Yeah.
like the old kind of vintage ones, and I use those. I'm not sure about some of the new ones, like Rosalie was mentioning. You'd have to make
Yeah.
sure that they're not gonna peel off or something. But the those vintage ones for sure.
And they're so pretty.
Yeah.
No, also a Taste of Herbs be offered again. Fall. So late September-ish. I don't know. Everyone out there, we're all just trying to, I don't know what's going on out there these days. We're doing our best. So yeah. But that's our intention anyway. Let's see. Okay. See a lot of people answering other people's questions. Thank you. That's really awesome. Questions strike you?
What are the biggest herb or plant look-alike dangers?
I would say the thing that first jumped in my mind is the Umbelliferae family. Poison hemlock, water hemlock, those are definitely some big major poisonous plants. And to the untrained eye, those plants can look very similar to others. They aren't at all related to yarrow, but they're both kind of like a multiple white flowers on the end of a stalk. And so if you're very new to it, then they can look similar. So you definitely want to know. Then there's ones that become trickier and trickier, like Queen's Anne's lace, which is used by herbalists, looks very similar to poison hemlock and water hemlock. So those are definitely ones. And that's, again, in the book, we do list those plants and have pictures of them and descriptions. And the more you can get to know those hazards, the better. Like we said, you always want to know those well. Where I live, one of the most common ones is death camas, and it has a very distinct flower that is not very, you wouldn't mistake it for something else. But before it flowers, it's pretty nondescript, and it can be confused with things like salsify, which is a foraged plant, or wild onions. So that's a big one to know. Foxglove, when it's young, foxglove grows pretty commonly on the other side of the state from here. And when it's young, it can look very similar to comfrey.
Could be
so there's
mistaken
that
for
one.
mullein too. So you want
Mullein, yeah, definitely, yeah.
watch out for that one.
Yeah.
Speaking of mullein, someone asked, how or when do you use mullein root over the leaves?
Well, the mullein root's very different from leaves, and it's used very differently. It's mostly used for bladder incontinence, or to strengthen the bladder, and also used for back pain. And those are two very common uses for mullein roots, and the leaves are not used in that way. We don't use leaves for strengthening the bladder or for back pain that we know of yet anyway. Those are just not how they're commonly used.
Somebody wanted to know, a couple people, about Wildcraft. Our board, it's a board game we have. I thought I'd just take a second and just show Learning Herbs, because a lot of people watching this may not know who's bringing this discussion to you. And so we are Learning Herbs, learningherbs.com. I'm going to just share a screen real quick and show you about that. So let's see here. This on Learning Herbs. So you go to learningherbs.com. If you click on products, right here we have Apothecary is a great quick start video guide to get you started in remedy making. We have a kit, but those are available quarterly. Herb Mentor, you click on that, and then that's our membership site with lots of great courses and a great community. And then we have our children's stuff, which is Wildcraft and Herb Fairies, both of which are available. And you just, it's not available on Amazon at the moment because of shipments and stuff, but we're shipping fast. So if you want our board game Wildcraft for ages 4 to adult, or Herb Fairies, which is like a whole box set of books and a whole learning system for your kids, it's really great, especially if the kids are home right now. Perfect time of year to get started on Herb Fairies. You can just go over to learningherbs.com. So that's who we are and what we have available. We've been around since 2005. And I think Rosalee's been around here since like probably 13 years of that or something like that. And Emily about 6 years, she said. So yeah, so that's Learning Herbs. So I just wanted to show folks that who may not know. But yeah, a lot of people are saying thanks for sharing your wisdom and such a beautiful book. And oh, the kit was so easy to follow. Thank you. That was the first thing I made, the herbal remedy kit. That's still available, and the next batch will be on sale in June. But you got to get on the waiting list because we only open it up to the waiting list, and they just sell out like every time we open them up to the waiting list. Every quarter, we do them now. We don't. It's super fun. Oh, I like to show this. Yvonne, they love the Wildcat game. I know what you meant. Well, right. This is a good thing. Someone said, like, my son loved it. He's when he was young. He's 23 now. This is when I feel old, when I talk on the phone to an herbalist, an adult herbalist, who tells me, "Oh, I got started with herbs when I was a kid, when my mom bought me Wildcraft," and I'm like, "Oh." That's how long Wildcraft's been around. So that's awesome. And thank you, Judith, for the words about herb fairies. And Deborah, what age group is the herb fairies book? It's like a range. I would say that young, like it could be 4 years old or whatever, if you want to read the books to them and just do the coloring. But as they get older, like even a 12-year-old may enjoy, like, there's lots of activities and you can do all the research and reading and everything and build binders and stuff yourself. So it kind of like how you engage with it depends on the age. What I like about it is a lot of families get one set, one copy. You use for all the kids in your house. You'll have a whole range of kids, and they'll all be working on it at the same time, but in a way that works best for them. So yeah, if you go over on that herb fairies page I just showed you on learningherbs.com, there's some cool videos there where you see a couple of families and how they use it. And there's this one family with like 6 kids, and they're like all use it and learn herbs with it. It's really fun. So yeah, thanks, and thanks, Kay. Is there any now I'm seeing for Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Trips. Give him many Wildcrafts over the years. Yep, still selling Wildcraft. Let's see here. I'll go back to questions that was right there. Are there any way to know if there are heavy metals like herbs in your mullein or plantain? And people seem to be concerned about, I guess the root conversation in this question is about toxicity and what we can trust and where we can harvest. Maybe that's the good way to go about this question.
Yeah, I mean, without like testing the herbs themselves, which would be hard for most of us to do, it was really more about knowing the soil in the area. And so that's something that you want to avoid, places that have a history of things like being industrial areas, or that have runoff from potential contaminants, like factories, large agriculture, right along a road, railroad tracks, things like that. And then if you really want to know specifically, in an area like maybe your yard or something, then you could go and get the soil tested. And I mentioned earlier, if you're in the United States, your local or state's cooperative extension service will offer soil testing services. They're usually pretty easy and affordable. You're just kind of digging up some soil from your yard and sending it off, and you'll get a report about the soil in your yard. And if you find that there are heavy metals in your soil, then you could use, do something like a raised bed or container gardening as well.
Or you could use those plants to help you
Yeah.
remediate the soils, because mullein, especially, and plantain are great for helping to clean the soils. So you can let them grow for a while. Red clover is also really good at that too. And so let them grow in those soils, clean the soils, and you can retest and see, if that, we're talking about your yard here. Obviously, we aren't going to like vacant lots necessarily and putting a lot of effort into it. Although you totally could.
And what about the like you're talking, you just mentioning that that a big part of this book was the ecological aspect of it, and not just being a book about like, here's these plants, make these remedies, that it's trying to help you connect to and make a difference in your local community. So can you talk about the community aspect of the book? One of you?
All right.
Doesn't that seem like you, Emily? That seems like a question for you.
Sure. Yeah, it was really important to bring in, you're looking at the whole community around a plant and around you, so that it's goes beyond just you harvesting a plant and making a food or a remedy with it, but you're thinking about the ecology, the other people, animals, even other plants, around this plant, that interact with it, and then also bringing what you learn and your passion for these plants, sharing that with your community, and working with other people in your community. So we have a lot of community stories throughout the book that highlight different ways that people have worked with plants and their community. Everything from starting like small container herb gardens in the city, to doing like native plant restoration efforts, free herbal clinics, all kinds of different ways, so that we're also giving back to the plants and giving back to the place where we live. And so it goes beyond, just what you're doing with the plant, but you're really like creating this whole better planet, really.
Cool. And here's a good question: is what are the different ways to prepare the various herbs you have talked about? Does the book explain how to do the different preparations?
Yes, definitely. For every plant in the book, at the beginning of the chapter, we list the various ways that you can make it into medicine. And then the book is like kind of part cookbook, part remedy making book. So there's recipes for every single plant. And like we were saying earlier, there's a recipe for chickweed salve, but once you gain the experience with chickweed salve, you can make salve out of so many plants that are in the book and plants that grow around you as well. Or there's violet vinegar in the book, as well as violet oxymel. And again, once you learn how to make medicine with vinegar, then you can be using that for a variety of different herbs as well. So there's definitely lots. That's for Emily is like a professional recipe creator, and I'm just a hobbyist. Maybe I'm a professional now. There's books to prove it, but that's definitely the well, Emily's just very good at it, John. You're laughing, but she's like knows
No,
all
I
like the
know
technical details,
Oh,
Um,
there's a course coming out this summer by Learning Herbs that's all Emily, and I know how detailed.
Yeah, she's very good at
We
the
filmed it last
recipes.
summer.
But that is the best way to learn. I mean, and for me, that's like the reason to learn, because like just reading about a plant in a book is not very exciting versus like actually getting to bring that plant into your life and to make remedies and foods out of it. Yeah, that's where the fun really is. So definitely that's covered in the book.
This is a good question. If the book's not purchased by Monday, you still be able to get the bonuses. Oh yeah, we're gonna leave those bonuses up for you. Just the gift basket drawing will end them. But past that, any bonuses that you see up there, if you go to Wild Remedies book, will be available for you. So
Yes, I know I don't have the gift basket to do a like show and tell, but I thought we could just mention it. The tools gift basket.
Yeah.
Emily and I curated that together with our most used tools, and there's like the hori knife. I use that practically every day these days, whether I'm out foraging or in the garden. It's a really nifty Japanese knife that's really great for digging, especially in rocky soils. It's kind of multi-purpose. I use it as a saw, like as a mini saw, as well as a digging tool. There's Fisker's pruners. It's something I also use every day these days. A sickle. I've only been using a sickle for like 3 or 4 years now, but man, once I started using it, I was converted. If you're harvesting things like St. John's wort, or I use it a lot for alfalfa, it's just a great way to really quickly gather herbs that are growing in clumps. There's cloth bags there. There's a loop, botanical loop for getting really close to the plants and seeing all those little plant parts in there. And there's the botanical drawing book by Wendy Hollander. She's an amazing plant artist, and the book is really cool. It just shows you like step by step, really demystifies the drawing of plants, which is great for journaling, to be able to journal plants well. And then also included with this is a membership an annual membership to United Plant Savers.
And I'm going to do the drawing on Tuesday morning, so all the orders need to be in by Monday night. Someone asked, can I buy the gift basket? And so when you order Get Wild Remedies and when you get access to the hub, you can click on the information about the basket and it'll give you links to some of these things. Or if you could just Google the items on there and buy them, because that's all Rosalee did. Rosalee just found all these and bought them and put them together. But you can buy, yes, and we don't sell the basket. It's just she just made one up for this. So yeah, but absolutely. Let's see here. I feel like I'm going to stop the screen here. How's it? How y'all doing? I feel like we've been on for more than a couple hours. I'm feeling like maybe a couple more questions. And then is there, before we take those, Rosalee, anything that has come up for you that you've wanted to share about Wild Remedies that maybe was something you wanted to talk about today that you didn't? Or I'm not putting you on the spot, but I know we've talked about in the last 2 hours. I feel like
John's like, talk for 2 hours about the book, and then I'm going to ask you to share a little bit more.
Yeah, that was stupid. Sorry.
No, it was good, John. Actually, just the other day, I have a car pulling up here. I hope they're not like asking if I'm okay. They're like, what are you doing by the side of the road?
If a police officer came over.
Yeah.
I'm doing a Facebook Live.
Yeah. No, I think it actually is a volunteer captain. Small community here, though. I think that.
I'll cut your feed off for a minute, and you can deal with that.
Yeah, well, actually, he has a dog. I think he might be taking a dog for a walk. I'm not sure. We'll just let him do his thing, and then I'll let you know.
Hey, this makes it more entertaining.
So the other day, I was near a patch of violets. I think it was just yesterday, actually, and I saw a fritillary butterfly going by and kind of flitting among the violet leaves. And I didn't actually know about this connection until 2 years ago or so when Emily taught me. And basically, I think so many of us are familiar with the connection between monarch butterflies and milkweed, and how monarchs really need the milkweed in order to complete their life cycle and to have more monarch butterflies. Well, the same is for some species of the fritillary butterflies and violets. And it was such a special thing, like out there. I was just sitting there, next to this patch of violets. I was resting and just kind of like enjoying the day. And then it was just so like that moment of just wonder and beauty, and seeing the fritillary butterfly, knowing that connection, and knowing that, maybe it was laying its larva amongst the leaves or whatever the case may be. And it was just such a beautiful thing. And to be able to look at violet on so many different layers, like know that I rely on this for medicine, know how much it brings joy to my heart when I see I keep saying dandelions, I see the violets in bloom. And there's that, John's holding up the illustration of the violets that's in the book, and there's a fritillary butterfly there. And all of the illustrations in the book have an insect or reptile or animal with them, and all of those were specially chosen because they have relationships with the plant. So I love how there's so many layers to getting to know plants, and I've been working with local plants for almost 20 years now, and there's always more to learn, and there's never a dull moment, and it still brings me so much joy. With the heaviness and the uncertainty of the world right now, those moments with the violet patch and the fritillary butterfly was just, priceless. Literally, it was just brought so much joy to my heart, and on so many different levels. So that's what I would still have left to say. And I'm not being arrested right now, too. So that's also a good thing.
It's okay, because somebody was like, said they vouched for you.
Cool.
Heidi's
well, they were putting up a sign. He was definitely like wondering what I was doing, but I think he saw the phone and kept his distance. But he was just putting up a sign.
Oh, that's great.
It'd be a good story, but I don't really want to tell that. Small community too, Man, that herbalist, she was in her car.
Oh, that is wonderful, Trip. Thanks for sharing that.
That is really cool.
That's cool.
That's excellent.
Thanks, Trip.
Cool. And I don't know what I don't know what Tracy was saying yes to, but yes.
Nice.
Let's see. All right. How are you feeling? This has been fun. This is fun. You know, now we've done these. Some folks that we don't, we say we're on like a couple 2 hours and 15 minutes, but Rosalee has done. I've done these with Rosalee when there's been classes integrated into it, and we've gone like I think our longest was like 4 hours and 15 minutes. So
I was hoping Emily would get that experience today.
yeah.
I know. And my husband asked, like, how long is this? I was like, I don't know. It could be on for hours.
Oh, is it time to raffle this truck off? We're going to raffle off. We usually raffle off Emily and Rosalee's husband's vehicles at this point when we get really delirious later in the.
I'm excited to hear that.
It never turned out well.
I just want to say that I just put that comment from about someone it was Summer Joe about thanking us for the launch and for us, for me, like they told a story about like Rosalee talked about how the idea for Wild Remedies and was like, oh, Emily's going to be perfect, and they wrote this book, and it's been just wonderful watching them over these last couple of years in this process, because it's been really intense and really involved, and there's so many layers. And for me, like for Learning Herbs, it was exciting because I felt like this book represents the essence and spirit and passion of why I got into learning about and using herbs and starting Learning Herbs in the first place. Like we've done a lot of really cool stuff, the board game, the Herb Mentor. We've been at it for 15 years doing a lot of amazing stuff. But, this book really sums up the reason why, for me, where my passion is, because I've always been about the wild remedies and learning about the native plants and the non-native plants that grow all around me that I've used for food and medicine for many years. It's so integrated into our family, and that's really been a story. It's a story. It's woven into the fabric and story of my family. It's woven in the story of Emily's family and Rosalee's family. And, to the point where yesterday I started off by showing a picture of my daughter wondering why she gathered these dandelion flowers. I'm like, cool. I love it that my just about 16-year-old daughter is gathering dandelions still. I thought, I thought she'd be past that at this point, but no. And then she made this cake that I've eaten a piece out of because it's so good. and that, and dandelions too, especially, have always been a symbol for me. That's why it's in the logo of Learning Herbs, because that's the herb that people most want to spray and get rid of, and the one they want to kill. And it's like not realizing the beauty and the medicine and the healing that's in that plant. And if we can just change the way we look at the world around us, like I think we're starting to do now with this pandemic that's going on, and let's hope that we start that the wild plants can be a tool for us to help us transform and change the way we look at the world. You think it's just about plants, but it's how you look at everything. It's the wildness in everything. And it's the medicine that's in everything. So I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't gone down this path or this interest and, made this my life. And dandelion is the ultimate symbol of that, because it is a nourishing, powerful plant, and it's one of the most advanced plants there are because it gets itself everywhere.
It's been especially fun this week, John, is for so long this book has been like, first it was Emily's in my book, and then we opened it up, and so many people have worked to put this book together, from recipe testers to people giving us quotes to endorsements to editors, the illustrator, on and on, photographers. But this was the week it became everyone's book. And the most exciting, Emily and I have talked about this like 20 times, I think, this week. The most exciting thing this week has been people's excitement and enthusiasm getting the book. There's the Wild Remedies Facebook group, and people have been posting so many photos of them with the book, or just, showing that the book has arrived. And already people are posting so many recipes, and the dandelion cake is a big hit. That's a popular one. People are making that one a lot, and
Cake.
yeah, and people are already posting. Yeah, cake, it's an easy sell. But people are already posting the recipes. People are loving the journaling, the discussions that are happening. I mean, just that this gets to be everybody's book now, and we all get to participate with it is just really fun, and it's just the beginning. So I'm really excited to see, how as it continues to evolve, and as we all get to participate with it, and see, the relationships that form from it, not only within our human communities, but within our plant and animal insect communities as well.
And sometimes when people are on with us this long, they know that I usually make a little reveal if I have one to reveal. But in a couple of weeks, if you're an Herb Mentor member, there's going to be something really cool by Emily and Rosalee starting that is connected to this book that's going to really help you all out. It might be a new little course they're putting together. And if you're an Herb Mentor member, it's just included in there. So, but if you're not an Herb Mentor member, we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. We'll help you out with that. Emily, and I just want to thank you too for working with you as well, and on this whole launch, and everything has been incredible, and seeing your contributions. It's just a great. It's just like when you hold this book and you look through it, and just all the levels and all, it's just infused with so much amazing wisdom and love, and yeah, it just feels so good. And I can really hear both of you. I know both of you well, and I can clearly hear both of your voices in this book, and together though, speaking together. And then you're right, Rosalee, it is becoming everyone's book now, because the herbs are, as Susan Weed says, are the people's, plant medicine is the people's medicine. And it's here for all of us to go out and explore and, change lives. So yeah, that's why we're here. So I think we'll end it there. Does that sound good, both of you? All right.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Well, Emily and Rosalee, thank you very much for spending your time on this Saturday with us. Really appreciate it. And we'll all be back, right? We'll be back.
We'll be back.
More to come.
Hopefully not in my car, but we'll be back.
Next time you'll be in your office. And thank you, Emily. Thanks to Xavier and Gregory for putting up with us today. And we'll see you all soon. And thank you, everyone, Learning Herbs community, Herb Mentor community out there. Really appreciate your time with us today. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.